Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, LinkedIn Live. Good morning, good morning. There's always a slight delay, so nobody will have seen me putting my makeup on, Richard, before we joined.
Although I think people would
Morning.
enjoy that.
They absolutely would not. Richard, good morning. I think you're one of very few people that have been on here twice. Do you know that?
It's the comeback.
The comeback king. Thank you so much for joining, Richard. Good morning.
Good morning.
How's your week been? Tell us how you were saying you've had a busy one, right?
It has been full. For those that haven't seen me on LinkedIn Live before, my name's Richard, and I'm the founder of Brum, which is a men's mental wellness run club who meet fortnightly using physical activity to get men's mental wellness on track. So this week we have one of our fortnightly 5Ks, and each of our runs begins with a conversational pacemaker. So if you've got something you want to get off of your chest, we have somebody there that is leading the way, showing you how to be authentic, how to be open and honest in your conversation. And this week we had Dr. Ranj, who is currently performing at Birmingham Hippodrome in the musical And Juliet. So some of you might know him. He's a pretty well-known TV doctor. You might have seen him on This Morning. You might have seen him on Strictly Come Dancing. He's amazing, and he came and spoke to us before he went on stage. So he spoke to us at 6:30 and he was on stage at 7:30, and then we did a run around the city.
I didn't realize he was in theatre this week. How random.
Everyone ends up in theatre.
And Richard, thank you. You've even done your own intro, so I don't even need to introduce you.
Sorry.
Right. That's absolutely fine. Good morning. So I've got Richard Loftus with me, off of Well Run Brum and other, amazing things. Richard is like, so your background, Richard is like a marketing person extraordinaire. Whenever I'm doing my latest kind of like crazy project, I'm like, Richard, what do you think of this name? Or what do you think of this logo? Or what do you think of whatever? So I've got Richard Loftus with me. So please, Richard is one of those people, actually, I sort of talk about you as being on my personal board, if that makes sense. Sometimes when I'm thinking random things, Rich is the person I reach out to. So good morning if you're joining live. Please do say good morning in the chat if you're joining live on this really bright, sunny morning. Is it sunny where you are, Richard?
It's gorgeous. I'm using natural lighting right in front of me, so that I've not got a ring light or anything, but I've placed myself strategically in front of the window so that I'm naturally lit.
Amazing. I forgot. Do you know what? I've changed the settings a little bit, so I'm a little bit all over the shop this morning. Good morning. We've had our first good morning in. I'm afraid I can't see your name because I don't have my phone with me, and the name's not pulling through. But good morning. Thank you for joining us. Tell us, whoever that is that said good morning, maybe just let me know what your name is. Like who is that's joined, and what is the weather like where you are? That's something I'm intrigued to know. Richard's naturally lit in the window, which is amazing. And we're going to be talking about Well Run Brum. I want for us to start, before we start, for those that maybe haven't heard of Well Run Brum and aren't connected with you on LinkedIn or whatever, just tell us about how it started, and just share as much or as little as you want to share in terms of, where the idea came from, etc., and all of that stuff.
Sure. So Well Run Brum really is, I always joke with people that Well Run Brum's a real selfish endeavor, because ultimately it was founded as a result of my own mental health crisis. So a couple of years ago, I called the GP sobbing and said that I couldn't cope with life anymore, and thankfully was able to get seen by a doctor that same day. I think the person on the end of the phone could hear how panicked I was, could hear how distressed I was, and was able to get me in straight away. And that was a huge relief. And as a result of that conversation, I was seen by a doctor, and I was signed off work for 3 months and prescribed antidepressants. And during that time, once I'd kind of taken some time for myself and had kind of got bored of watching daytime TV, I kind of just wanted something in my body was like, you need to move. That's the only way I can describe it. And my body was just like, you must move. And I just went out for a run, and I'd run kind of like on and off over the years, but nothing consistent, nothing that I'd get to maybe like a moment, like a 10K or something, and then I'd be like, cool, done, and I'd just park it again. But I began running and building it into a habit, rather than just with an end goal. And out of that habit, I started saying to a few people, do you want to come for a run with me? And found that on those runs, I was able to have much more open and honest conversation about where I was and what was going on. And eventually, kind of once I was feeling in a headspace that felt more like my own again, I kind of reflected that more people needed that. More people need that opportunity to have open and honest conversation, and particularly men. Men are typically socialized in a manner that dissuades them from being vulnerable, and one of the few emotions that they are actively encouraged to kind of like express is anger. And whilst that has a purpose, it's not the only emotion that exists. There are other ways to be able to express what's going on. And I think particularly for me, during that time, I know that a lot of the reason I struggled to open up earlier than that crisis moment was kind of all tied up in that idea of what masculinity is and what it is to be a man, and being unwilling to ask for help or to, and probably to be heard for that as well. So I think that's kind of the context, really, which I appreciate for, pre 9 a.m. on a Friday morning is pretty deep to go in at that level, but that's how it started. Yeah.
It's absolutely fine. It's just we're keeping it real right on this Friday morning. No, it's absolutely fine. And thank you for sharing that. And obviously we've talked a number of times, and each time I hear, sort of like something else in your story, but it's really interesting in terms of, I guess, like you say, I mean, you call it like a selfish endeavor, but the fact that it helped you so much, like that running helped you so much. What is it about? So just talk to us maybe a little bit about the science of that. What is it about? And I know you've spoken about like shoulder to shoulder and that sort of thing. What is it about, the act of, running together that you think makes it easier for men to talk and kind of open up?
Yeah, I think it's that same principle. It's less of a science, but it's that same principle of, when you're in a car and, you're sometimes locked in that space together, but you're not looking at each other. I think a big part of it is actually not looking at each other. It's that idea of side by side, but the lack of eye contact almost allows for that vulnerability because you're not eyeballing the person. But I think it's also that thing of you're both pointing in the same direction. You're both headed towards the same goal. Both struggling probably a little bit with it as well, right? Running for some people isn't always easy. So already your guard's down because your focus is one foot in front of the other, or your focus is breathing. And so your focus isn't necessarily on what am I going to say? How is that going to be perceived? Your focus is on, I've just got to get to the end of this run. And so the talking is kind of like secondary. But as a result of it being secondary, you're more willing to kind of just be like, oh, this is what I'm thinking in this exact moment. There's less fear attached to it and less thought attached to it. Less.
Yeah, I love it. It makes so much sense. And then let's just go back to why it's a men only space. And for those that I mean, obviously, and we won't necessarily go down too far down that rabbit hole of the men only spaces, because we may do actually, but it is a men only space. And I must admit, sometimes I look at, like, because you have guest speakers, right, to open your run, and sometimes I look at it and I feel a bit jealous. I'm not gonna lie. I'm just like, damn, it's only for men, right? But tell us about why you wanted it to be a men only space, why you thought that was important.
Yeah, I think this goes back to my own experience. Now, don't get me wrong, I spoke to lots of different people. You and I have even had that conversation. I can remember saying to
Yeah,
you only a few months ago, in fact, like that I could remember being on the phone to you at one point, and
yeah,
I was, and I was upset when I was talking to you, and
yeah,
you weren't aware that I was as upset as I was when I was talking to you, but also
yeah,
kind of I think you also reflected quite honestly, like, I can't really recall that conversation, whereas in my mind it's so vivid.
yeah,
And I think that's really interesting,
yeah,
because I've got so much of that time. There's not much that some of the details I'm a bit like sketchy on, but some of the conversations that I did have, you, as you know, were supportive in as much as trying to enable me to move on from the situation that I was in. So I'm always very grateful for that. So that's not to say, the reason I say that is because
mm,
women have been important as part of that journey. But
mm,
the reason it is a men's only space is really around that idea that men being comfortable in the first instance with being vulnerable with other men. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
there is an expectation for men to present in a particular way. And when I say men, let me be clear, this is a broad spectrum. This isn't specific
mm,
to ethnicity, sexuality. This
yeah,
is everyone. I'm a gay
yeah,
man, and I am still in a space where this idea of what masculinity is and what being
yeah,
is still impacting me. So yes, there's there's a cross section of people that this still affects regardless of their setup, is what I'm saying.
yeah,
Um, but men are typically socialized, as I've said, in a manner that dissuades them um, from being vulnerable. And this really is creating space for that, because hopefully that then bleeds out into other areas of their lives. So it means that they might be able to go home to their partner and be a bit more vulnerable in the
mm,
conversation that they need
yeah,
to have. Or it means in their workspace, they can go into work and be more vulnerable with a colleague or their manager.
yeah.
It's kind of like practicing that behavioral pattern.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And, and as you say, in terms of, because a lot of people, and I'm guessing that a lot of people that know you, um, would be surprised that one of the things that you said was that those pressures around, masculinity and what is a man, that you still felt them. Because if anybody knows Richard, right, especially like, say for example, I never forget your outfit for the first Black Talent Awards, right, which was incredible, like, just really beautiful. And that was the word I used, beautiful outfit. Your nails are always like immaculate. I think sometimes people might associate some of those external things with, therefore, saying, oh, therefore, Richard doesn't necessarily ascribe to those more traditional traits of masculinity. Therefore, he wouldn't have as much of a problem being vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? But I think what you're saying is that even though we may see some of that externally, but still internally, there are still going to be those sort of like little things in your head that sort of say, oh, this isn't what men do, or men don't behave in a certain
Yeah.
way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely do. And you've got, those are learned behaviors. For me,
Yeah.
like coming, coming to terms with some of those things that you've spoken about are like, I do enjoy getting my nails done. And I like to look. It disappoints me that you say the first Black Talent Awards. It's sort of it implies like the other two times it was like lesser versions of that first outfit. So
Do you know
for
what it
everyone
was?
tuning in, all of my outfits were excellent. Let me, I'm saying that, but all of them have been great.
Do you know what it was? It was the first year you had, and you inspired me, because I've gotten a couple of these this year. I've renewed my wardrobe, but you had a black pussy bow blouse on, shirt, and like these sparkly boots, like just amazing. It was fire. Like the outfit was fire, literally.
Um, but yeah, but I think I guess this it goes back to that socialization. That's learned
Yeah,
behaviors, right?
yeah,
And for me, I went to an all boys school, and you know, as a kid where everybody else knew that I was gay before I did, you know, a lot of my like learned behaviors at that time
yeah.
were around femininity, meaning weakness, because
Right.
I was the most feminine person, and so even though I'm comfortable wearing really nice outfits at every award, not just the first one, and where you know, and having my nails done,
Yeah,
there are elements of me still believing that some of the behaviors that you would associate with femininity
yeah,
are I
yeah,
need to protect and not
yeah,
show off.
yeah. I love what you said about the importance of men being able to feel vulnerable in front of other men. And I think maybe that is all part of the thing about the importance of the men's spaces, because and there's still a lot of debate about this. And even there's a post that I've been commenting on the last couple of days where somebody who runs their men's mental health network in their organization, there was a question around, and that's a woman, and there was a
I
question
saw
around
you commenting on
should
this post, yeah.
yeah. And my comment was, I didn't even know how useful it was, because I was like, I don't know what the answer, I haven't yet figured. I'm sort of trying to figure it out. I sort of flip between almost like what is the role of women in some of those spaces, especially around men being vulnerable. I've started using a term a little bit, actually, which is when it comes to men in lots of different things in terms of building relationships, whether that be friendships or not. I've started using a term which is that I feel like women sometimes baby men. That's the only term that I use. And do you know what I mean? And I don't mean that in terms of support, so I don't mean in terms of, say, for example, with our relationship, I've never felt that I'm babying you, right? But I think sometimes in terms of things like, women that are always organizing things for men, buying, the example I gave was like, when it's Christmas and that sort of thing, and you buy the gifts for your partner, if you're in a hetero, so you buy your partner's presents for other people, all of that stuff that takes the responsibility away from them in terms of developing social relationships and exercising those muscles. I almost think that sometimes women don't allow men to exercise those muscles on their own. We're constantly like trying to drag the emotion out of them and almost like to be the emotion for them. Do you know what I mean? That's one of my concerns.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And also like your version of emotion might be quite different to mine, So I think
Mm,
that in itself, like what I'm willing to share as an emotion may not meet your expectation, but it may be all I've got, right? Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's quite fascinating. I've been following that thread, actually. One of the things I should say, I said this to you on a call the other day when we were doing preamble for this. Cheryl and I have done a few kind of like conversations in the last few weeks, and what invariably happens is we're like, oh, we need to talk about this on the live. And I guarantee we won't have time to talk about any of the things that we have said we must talk about that on the live. But one of the things that I did say on that call is you've been doing a lot of research. This particular area around, around men's groups and men's mental
Yeah.
health, I think is really interesting you at the moment. And when something
Yeah.
interests you, you do a deep dive. And for
Yeah.
people that follow you on LinkedIn, my feed, certainly, I'd say 50% of it is as a result of what Cheryl is now curating for herself and then commenting on is now on my feed, which, the founder of the men's mental health movement, I'm thrilled by. So I get to see all of
Yeah.
those. And I very much am someone that sits and kind of voyeuristically kind of like watches what's going on. I don't engage necessarily always with the comments, but I like
Yeah.
seeing what's happening.
Yeah, because some of that, you're right. I am in a deep dive at the moment around men's spaces. Some of that is because I've been working with so many organizations around employee networks, and it's the reason I'm deep diving, it's the response I get from organizations when they haven't, for example, got a men's network, and I get pushback. It's that I get immediate pushback tends to be, or I get, oh, why, why do I either get, why would we need a men's network, or we don't need a men's, it's one of those. And so that's what's kind of sending me down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But also on LinkedIn, what I'm really keen to do is really connect. There's so many men doing great work in this space. There's a lot of men doing a lot of talking, not a lot of work. And then there's some men doing great work, physically going out there and creating groups. And I love the men that are just doing the talking and all that. That's great. But I especially love to showcase the men that are running the groups, because I think that there is so much to learn. For me, so again, this is my selfish reason. So my selfish reason is so that when I speak to these organizations, I have a better understanding of what it takes to run these groups, and I can then signpost the organizations to the groups. And I'm starting to do a lot of that, so you'll know I had like Tom Gold on here a few weeks ago, and I've done some introductions for him. And then I had a massive call, such an impactful call for me last week, which because I called you up straight away afterwards. We were on the phone for an hour. I was like, Richard, you will not believe this. And things like that. So when I come across men that are doing this work in a way that I think really sort of like resonates, and and can really help some of these organizations that are trying to figure out how to do this, I'm like, I need to introduce you into my network. And I also want these networks and these men to connect as well, because I think you're stronger together. I think women have been doing this for years now, like the women's networks and stuff, and have kind of created almost like a massive ecosystem of like women in tech and women this and all the resources. And but I think we need to do the same for men's spaces now. That's kind of how I'm thinking.
I agree.
Good. Yeah. Martin Griffin. Good morning, Martin. How are you? And some are tired. Yes, some people are tired. Absolutely. So I do think it's important to just connect. Everyone that's kind of on this, on the same page, and potentially doing the work in different ways. From different angles. So yours is the running clubs. Obviously, Tom Gold was like the Bear Grylls of LinkedIn, right? That's what I'm calling Tom. So Tom's like doing, the bushcraft stuff. You've got Daniele that's doing like the hard as nails, so for those that want to kind of get their nails painted and stuff like that, it takes all sorts, you know what I mean? So I think it's really useful. I'm really glad that I can kind of connect these different individuals. Good morning, Stuart. Good morning, Stuart. Cumberbatch, morning. Question for you, Richard, do men find it even more difficult to be vulnerable at work? A lot of the men's groups I see are outside of that. That's a really interesting point. What are your thoughts on that, Richard?
Yeah, I do think men find it more difficult to be vulnerable at work. That's certainly my experience in the lead up to my moment of crisis. Was definitely tied up with that for sure. And unfortunately, the statistics around kind of like men's suicide as well is definitely that age range of people that are in professional employment, kind of at a steady point in their careers. So I certainly see that as an issue. And also I think again about the way that we're socialized to be at work definitely creates a culture where being vulnerable is in a workspace for a man is problematic for sure. But all the reason for, as Cheryl was just saying, all the more reason when you're sometimes met with hesitancy or absolute no's on men's groups in a working space. I think that it's such a need for it. And I think the reason there's pushback, as I said to you the other day, the reason there's pushback on that, I think, is because when people think of men's groups, they either think of like old boys clubs, or they think of leaders, frankly. And by leaders, I mean kind of like global leaders. And I think I think that's a miss, to be honest. I think, again, it goes to how people are socialized and what they've learned. But I think people assume when we talk about a men's group at work, they're talking about, well, there's already plenty of men in leadership roles. They don't need role models. Agreed. But what they still need is to find ways to be authentic in the workplace, which is better for everybody. And not necessarily about getting more men into leadership roles. It might be about behaviors. It might be about better interaction. It might be about collaborative working. All of those things. That's why there's a need.
Yeah. And this is, exactly what you've said there. And this is where I think, actually, and I mentioned it in a post that I did this week, that, I think that the scope of employee networks in organizations is changing anyway, because it's already broadening beyond, protected characteristics and underrepresented groups. So it's already broadening beyond that, because we've got things like sustainability and, other things. So I think when it comes to men's networks, I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of whereas some of the networks, one of the objectives they have is, for example, representation at senior levels, right? And obviously, and you've also got to factor intersectionality into that as well, even with men, right? Because men are not a monolith, right? First of all, but I think with men, I think you're absolutely right that the aims of the network may be slightly different to other networks. So it may not be necessarily around advancement and career progression, all of that stuff. It may, as you say, be around, sort of like behaviors or just, the well-being and all of that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? I mean, as you were talking there about the pressure on men, and to Stuart's question around, is it more difficult? I think you're spot on in terms of that age range. And I think I was sharing with you that I found out recently that somebody that I worked with that was very, very senior, at board level, had unfortunately, passed away, died as a result of suicide. And there is something about, how do we create the spaces, and not to say necessarily that networks would cure that, but how do we create those spaces? It is about more than just the traditional role of how networks are seen. And I guess in the stuff that I'm posting, to your point around some of the stuff I curate, I'm trying to my post around, as you were talking, we were talking about the Garrick Members Club. So a lot of people remember that headline last year, and it was like, oh, Boris Johnson's in there and da da da. And so when people think about men's spaces, we often do think privilege, power, hoarding,
decision makers, all of those things. We're not thinking about the majority of men who are not having a seat at that table.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not thinking about working club, right, of which there literally is one like 100 yards down my street, right? So that's so I'm trying to get people, when they think about men's spaces, to not just go straight to this is a bad thing because it's about hoarding power. We've got to think more broadly than that.
Definitely. But also, to Stuart's point, if you and specifically to Stuart, if you are not finding it in your workspace and it's only available to you out of work, start there. Build that community outside of work, and it will filter in. So
I mean, I was going to say, but what you do with Well Run Brum, I mean, I know a couple of organizations actually where they've almost like started like a bit of a running thing. I need to do you some intros, because I think the framework that you've got for Well Run Brum, and potentially they do it maybe where it's like, okay, on a such and such a morning, it's a men's run, and this is what we're going to do. Because actually one of the organizations I'm thinking of commented on the post, the poll that I did around men's versus women's spaces. There was a guy that commented, and so I think you probably know which organization I'm referring to, but that would be great, to so if anybody's watching this and they're thinking, how do we maybe start something, get Richard in to do a run. In fact, you did the walk, didn't you, for last year's ERG Leader Summit? You kind of led, it wasn't quite a run because people weren't in there, like a 10-15 minute walk, right? Just like a walk and talk.
Again, just creating that space for open and honest, vulnerable conversation if you want it. The other thing I should say, Some people don't want that. They come along, they listen to
Yeah.
a speaker. Speakers are always fascinating. We've had some amazing speakers join us over the last year.
Yeah.
We've had Olympians, we've had Paralympians, we've had one of the gladiators from the TV show. We've had really amazing people. We've also had a volunteer who's volunteered for 40 years for the
Yeah.
Samaritan come and talk to us. We've had
Yeah.
incredible people that are out doing the work, and we've got people that are so at the peak of their career.
Yeah.
So
that
we've
that
had
that video. I mean, anybody that isn't connected with Richard on Instagram, well run Brum or Richard on Instagram or LinkedIn, if you check out some of Richard's videos done by the amazing Jonathan Williams, right? But just check out some of Richard's videos. That Samaritans volunteer that you had, oh my goodness, like his story.
Really powerful story.
Yeah.
And I do
Yeah.
one of the things that I've spoken to Jonathan, and Chris Smith is another one of our one of the directors for Well Run Brum, but one of the things that like I am keen on is how we can use some of that incredible content that Jonathan creates as a result of and the runs to break up that algorithm. So I know, for example, the digital space is filled with men that are talking about kind of masculinity in very particular ways. And I think there's an opportunity with the content that we're creating, which are male speakers talking vulnerably about their own experiences, their lived experiences, being heard by a group of other men. I think content like that, we need to keep pushing out to change the algorithm. And I think that's a space I'd like to explore further on how we can be doing that more.
Because so interesting.
Because I do think the digital space, doom scrolling, I know you're not on Instagram at the moment, and you can sit there and just waste time. And the more content that you engage with, the more it's served to you. So if that can be broken up with some of these powerful men's stories, like Andy the Samaritan, who is, saw a really awful thing and has then turned that into a purpose. I want to hear more stories like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks to everybody that's listening. I know some people now have to jump off to their 9 o'clock meetings. Stuart was saying there is a men's walking and talking club near me getting lots of traction. So and there is something about so as we're wrapping up, how could, if there's an organization that's watching this, I mean, as well as obviously they can get you in. So Stuart, Richard is Midlands. Well, actually you're sort of like, are you equidistant between Birmingham and London? But you're more sort of like Midlands kind of.
I'll go anywhere. Get in touch.
So Richard could obviously come in and do like a walk and talk, or almost like facilitate like a run or something like that. But maybe there's a version that organizations could do for themselves, right? In terms of like a walk and talk. So maybe could you just maybe talk through, if somebody wanted to start something like that, like a social run or a walk and talk, just maybe explain to them the framework of how you do it and the elements that work, and do you know what I mean? Like all of that piece.
I mean, firstly, if you think about it, stop thinking about it, just do it. Just do it.
I used to say that to you. I'd be like,
just do it. Just get it done. Stop thinking about it and get it done. But I think in terms of structure, we have a meeting time. People, you okay? We have a meeting time. We then have a speaker. So the speaker talks for 5 to 10 minutes. We then do a warm up, and the warm up can be really light. It doesn't need to be anything major, but it just gets people's bodies moving, and then we head out for a 5K. If you don't know, if you haven't got time to plan a route, you can literally go 2.5K in one direction until your watch says you've hit 2.5K, and then turn around. It can be an out and back. It doesn't need to be like a circular loop. An out and back is totally fine. That's what that's what we did when I didn't know the area around by the ERG summit last year. We just went we went a particular direction, then we turned around again. Great. And then at the end, we do a brief conversation to kind of bring it to a close as a collective. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that.
Yeah, I love
Don't get
that.
me wrong. I've done because of the direction of Well Run Brum, I've done some training courses as well. I've done my leadership in running as a run leader through England Athletics. I've done a mental health first aid course. So I've equipped myself with the skills that I need for Well Run Brum.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about setting something up that is, a small group, just set it up and go.
Yeah.
And the other thing I should say is I was talking to somebody yesterday with run clubs. If you were thinking about joining one, join them all. You don't need to be loyal to a run club. It's not something that you're like, I only do that one. Go to all of them, experience all of them, because they all offer something different, particularly in Birmingham where we are. There's so many. You can go out and have different runs, different conversations, different purpose to the run as well. Rock Up is amazing in the city at the moment on a Saturday morning. That's a real party vibe. It's a great, good time atmosphere. You've got Swifties on a Thursday. They're an LGBT running group, and that they create for that specifically. Over in Solihull, you've got Just Start Run Club. There are loads of that. Find them. Go and do more. Meet different people. Have different conversations. Wherever it is, go out and run.
I mean, and it could be a really good way of getting people back into the office, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? And getting people talking to each other when they come back into the office, if they know that there's going to be like a morning or a lunchtime walk and talk or something, or a run. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I do think one of the things that we are lacking, and I think another reason for creating Well Run Brum, one of the things that we are lacking now is community. And I think that's ultimately what's been built here, is a community of people outside of these runs. I'm checking in with people on different things all the time. We've got some of our runners this weekend are doing both London Marathon and Manchester Marathon, in separate spaces. So, people have got runs coming up that they've been training really hard for. Birmingham Half in 2 weeks, and there's a load of us running Birmingham Half. Some are doing Birmingham 10K. You find out more about people's lives and you build that community. Our runners has just got a puppy and they're training it as a therapy dog. Incredible. Community is what is ultimately what we're talking about here. And you're right. If we all work remotely, or certainly some of the time, workspaces, particularly offices that are trying to encourage people back into their offices, create moments of community like this. Give it further intention beyond just coming in for the meetings. Create moments outside of that. Amazing. We do a walk and talk in some branches across work. Yeah, it's exactly what I'm saying. Great way to catch up and have well-being chats and open up. And if you can get out on a walk when you're having a meeting or a one-to-one, go and do that instead. Get outside.
Absolutely.
You'll have a conversation as a result of it, for sure.
Yeah. And good morning to Hardev. And Hardev's in Birmingham, I feel. Well, all over the country. But Hardev, you need to get Richard in. Get Richard in to
don't get you. Come to Well Run Brum and see what we're up to.
True. Yeah. So we're going to wrap things up now. If for those that I know, it's we've got things to do, Richard. For those that don't know where and how to find you in terms of what are you on Instagram? What's your handle on Instagram? Is it just Well Run Brum?
Well Run Brum, and you can now find us on LinkedIn as well. Well Run Brum CIC.
Amazing. Well Run Brum. Richard, it's been amazing. I know we could talk forever, right? I need to get you back on. Maybe you'll be the first person on that's been on 3 times.
Give the people what they want.
Oh, Richard, you're absolutely amazing. You kill me. And good morning to Otis as well, that's listening on YouTube. Otis is actually my cousin, so for people that don't know. Wow. And he runs, actually. I think I want to say that I'm sure he used to have a running club. Otis, I'm sure you used to do a running club or something. Yeah.
Can I do a few shout outs before we wrap up?
Of course.
Yes.
Shouting out 0121 crew, for sure.
Let me tell you, there's a couple of things that I do want to do a quick shout out for, and I'm sorry.
Because you've got some you've got some great events and stuff coming up, haven't you?
Exactly.
Right, because Well Run Brum meets up every fortnight.
Yeah.
On a Wednesday.
On a Tuesday
On
at
a Tuesday.
6:45. So our next
Yeah.
run is on Tuesday the 6th of May.
Yeah.
And we've got an amazing speaker that's coming to join us for that. It's a guy called Toby. He is the founder of a testicular cancer charity, and he's going to be running around the city with us dressed as a giant pair of testicles. So that's going to be quite something. Come along to that. So he's also doing London Marathon this weekend in that same
dressed
costume.
as a pair of
Yeah. And honestly, what an incredible way to start that conversation. If you were talking about somebody starting conversations, that is a difficult conversation to get into. But I'll tell you, when you see a man dressed as a giant pair of testicles, you're talking about it. So a great way to inspire conversation. And then the other thing that I need to do a shout out for is, of course, Friday the 9th of May, we've got Deo Cato joining us at Grosvenor Road Studios. And he is an ultra runner who's going to be making his way to Birmingham to share his story of running from Cape Town to London. In charting human migration. And his story is going to be accompanied by music by Black voices. It's going to be truly incredible.
Yeah. And this is the other hat that Richard wears that some people maybe don't know. Richard is like a massive music fan. Like that's how we met when you were at Symphony Hall, right? Yeah. Heading up marketing and the rebrand and everything. If everybody, sometimes we were talking about Symphony Hall because I was there last night at an amazing gig, Gregory Porter. Oh my gosh, like my heart, honestly. But Richard is, if everybody sort of looks at, B Music, which is the charity that's behind Symphony Hall and Town Hall, and looks at that, even in terms of that branding, Richard is the man that was behind that, which is so incredible. So at the time that I joined, Richard was the one, along with obviously the rest of the leadership team advocating for change. So Richard is the man. Tom, good morning as well. I forgot to give Tom a shout out. Great show today. Thank you so much, Tom. Honestly, I love Tom so much. I can't even tell you. Perfect. All right, then we're gonna wrap it up there, Richard. We're gonna wrap it up. It's been incredible.
It's been so good. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I know. No, thank you so much. I've been trying to get you on here for ages.
It's been a minute.
So so please do connect with Richard. Follow him on LinkedIn. Follow Well Run Brum on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Reach out if you want to know more about what he does, or if you want to get him into your organization. If you've got an event or whatever, because he is amazing. He's even better like live in person, if that were possible. In the real world. So everybody, thank you. Honestly, thank you so much for staying with us for 40 odd minutes. And if you're watching this on the replay, thank you so much. And Richard, you are going to be joining us actually for this year's ERG Summit as well, aren't you?
Oh, so I wouldn't miss it.
Absolutely. So you will, if you're coming to the summit, you will see Richard there again. All right, that's it. We're out of here. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.